Holding very still, just observing whatever is moving in the mind stream in any of the sense fields. Be an observer just for these few minutes. Just observe. And if you can, don't add, subtract, divide, make no comments. See you guys out there. Thank you for coming. Thank you, everyone, for attending this evening's Dharma Talk, which falls on every Wednesday evening at quarter after 6 Eastern Time, and is the same time that happens the other 4 days of the weekday, except Wednesday we do Dharma Talks. And Sokuzan does the first Wednesday of each month. I do the other 3 Wednesdays, which gives him an opportunity to practice teaching the Dharma. So it's me. So the title of this evening's Dharma talk is. Before I say that, let me first of all thank you for all the help that you're giving us through this community, through your just attendance and being here, being part of this community, and also thank you for all the support that we get. Not only in that way, but also financially, we get a lot of help. We have all kinds of projects going on. The big community mindfulness center is in the works. We're fundraising for that. Perhaps some of you have heard, we haven't really kicked it up full speed. I don't know when that's going to happen. Do you know?
Closer to this fall.
Closer to this fall, but we're still working on it in other ways with different donors that we know really well, that we've known for a long time, and have been very helpful. So we're just doing the best we can with it. We actually hired a fundraising person. Isu is a professional. We've been working with her for I don't know how many months now.
Over 8
months. There's still a ways to go. And also we have different situations that are happening in the monastery complex. Things like dealing with infestation of various kinds. Can you say anything about what's happening in your location without feeling sad? What was it?
Groundhogs.
Groundhog, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's
woodchuck.
woodchuck. The
Are
woodchuck.
they grounds?
Those- They're really big. They're called pigs. So anyway, there's that. Plus, we're right in the middle of having another retreat out. We have one out at the Black Stag, which is a 10 acres. We own 10 miles northeast of here, where people do solitary retreats back in the woods. We're building another one that's a little bit larger, and we'll have a wood stove instead of a propane or electric heat. That's Jason's been out there getting poison ivy all over him, clearing the brush and everything. So, and everybody's working in different ways to make that all work. And so other projects too. Can anybody think of anything else that we're
24.
Yeah, we just bought another house right on Anderson Court, 44, which is I've named Southern Mountain because it's on the south side of the road that the other mountains are the other houses. So that makes 1, 2, 3. Well, I don't know how many houses were owned, but several. And 44 is we just got that closed on that, and Kenzan, one of the Sangha members here, is going to be kind of living over there for a while and actually doing renovations on that, and eventually, I don't know who will be living there, but somebody, maybe a family, or maybe 1 or 2 people. So that's happening. That costs money. All of that stuff does, and so help us with that. And then, of course, if you can, the big project coming up, the Community Mindfulness Center, which I'm very highly motivated to see through all the way, so that we can actually offer a kind of mind training. It's not necessarily Shikantaza, but just simple mind training, just mindfulness. So anybody in this neighborhood can walk in here and without being charged a fee, because most people can't afford fees in this neighborhood, in this whole part of town, can actually walk in here and get introduced to some way to work with their mind that isn't necessarily manipulating, controlling, covering up, and all that stuff. All the other ways that we do it in our society. I'm going to talk a little bit about that tonight. The title of the talk, as I started out to give you, comes from a long time ago. When I first heard it, it's called "No One Wants to Be Suffered." That's the quote that I heard in 1979 when I was attending a Dharma talk given by one of His Holiness the 16th Karmapa's regents by the name of Tai Situ or Tai Situpa. At the time he was probably 30 years old, maybe less. And that was the title of his talk. And so Tibetan and had some accent, there. So that, but that's the way he would say, and he said it several times in that talk. And he was talking about the first noble truth of life is suffering. And then he said, no one wants to be suffered. And then he went on to talk about it in different ways, which all I remember was his presence was pretty strong. And anyway, meant a lot to me at the time. 1979, I think it was. Could have been a year earlier, possibly. So no one wants to be suffered. No one wants to suffer. But the way in society, our culture, and the way we're trained, we're taught different things, and we're introduced to different things in school and in our living room and in our family, and ways to deal with suffering. And suffering in simple forms like boredom is suffering. Just agitation, anxiety there, and most of the ways have to do with doing this in a relative way of fixing it, covering it up, or pushing it away, or doing something about it to it, rather than looking at the fundamental nature. And the fundamental nature is, this is how we get into the spiritual path, is we're going to look at the fundamental nature of the mind, not just take what shows up in the mind and shove it aside, take what shows up in the mind and cover it up, or explain it, or blame something. Have you noticed how great that is? If you could actually blame someone for how you feel, doesn't that you feel quite a bit better temporarily, until you might see that it's probably not what's really happening. You're the one with the feelings, as I've said. I haven't said this in a few years, or maybe it's been 3 weeks, but I used to say, no one's pouring a whole bucket of emotion in you. So your emotions, not you, the ego, but this consciousness is showing up in this particular human form that you call Bill or Jane or whomever. They are your feelings. And if you do anything with those feelings other than receive them, I'll say that again. If you do, and if I get too strident, will you please scowl at me? I'm trying not, it's better. I like that scowl. Oh, I've been told that I'm a little on the strident side these days by several people. So that's just, and you guys 83, you might want to give that a shot. Okay. Where was I? Is that a scowl? Oh, that's not, huh? Trying to scowl. So
They're your feelings, you were saying, Sokuzan.
Thank you, Bob. That'd be a good poem title. Very good poem title. Feelings. Stop blaming people. No one is at fault. The basic teaching of the Buddha's Dharma, which I learned a long time ago, was all dharmas, or anything that arises, the dharma of the stick, the dharma of a clock, the dharma of a horse race, the dharma of the Buddha, are without blame. There's no first cause to anything. It just looks like it. And when we're convinced, or we believe that there's a first cause, we think we can meddle with it. We think we can stop it, or interfere with it, or change it, or make it go this way or that way, or shut down, or explode, or whatever may be happening. And to some extent you can. That's why it's so seductive, because it looks like you can put the stick up here. Or you can change your mind and put it back. So the illusion of control is powerful when you are aligned with your body and think you are just a body. But you might get a little bit of an idea that you're not just your body when you go to sleep and the body just lays there, and yet you have this incredible inner landscape of beings and problems and issues and a whole lifetime showing up inside your mind stream, called dreaming. So what am I saying? I'm saying you can continue to cover things up. You could continue to, I get down the list, drink, play poker, have a hobby, build model ships inside of bottles. Or maybe there's other hobbies that are a lot more sophisticated. You can do all kinds of things that quite often are kind of a distraction from the anxiety or from the boredom. Boredom is very powerful. If you're starting to feel bored at any given time, that is your opportunity to wean yourself away from the demand for entertainment. This is what sitting meditation is about. You sit down and you probably are going to get bored. Maybe not the first week, first month, first year, but eventually that's what's going to show up as just stone boredom. Nothing's happening. This can't be valuable. Especially happens in the middle of a solitary retreat about 3 or 4 weeks in, or 3 or 4 days in. Just it must be some kind of a wonderful experience. And you know, it's interesting because sometimes that will happen. Sometimes if you do nothing for quite a while, you start to engage with, and I'm saying engage, it's a very qualified area, but engage with aspects of consciousness that don't belong to anyone. When that starts to happen, then we start to have what the Japanese call kensho, or insight into your true nature. In other words, you're getting flashes of the incredible vastness, profound and vast quality of consciousness that belongs to no one. And yet you, as an apparent singularity of a being, have access to this. But you notice, perhaps you've noticed, you can't keep that. You can't have that experience because it doesn't belong to anyone. And so when the ego reaches out and says, yeah, I want some of that wonderful enlightenment experience, that kensho, give me more of that. It tends to vanish, go away, and then we go back into the whatever, disappointment or sadness, or wondering what happened to that or how we can get it back. And some teachers teach how to get that back. Some teachers teach how to maintain it or how to crank things up. I don't. I'm very delighted if you're miserable. Am I? No, I'm heartbroken that you're miserable, but I also know, just like watching a child learn how to roller skate or learn how to ride a bike, that you have to go through that in order to learn. You have to go through the difficulty, the suffering that is involved. No one wants to be suffered, but we have to enter into that. It's not nihilism, it's not pessimism, it's the truth. So what's being recommended is, every talk I give is same situation. Train your mind to see clearly so that the identity part that tends to get in the way, that wants to have satisfaction, that wants to get to do something correctly, that wants to have a claim or be respected or something, wants, desire. Second noble truth. First one is no one wants to be suffered, as according to Taisi Tupa Rinpoche. Actually, it's his eminence, Taisi Tupa, so he's way up there in the pantheon of tulkus or incarnated beings from other lifetimes. Nirmanakaya Buddhas. We want something else. Second noble truth. We want that to go away. We want more of the good stuff, less of the bad stuff. And we use, as we're taught in our society, our culture, how you can be happy. You watch the news and watch every 8 minutes, there's about 5 minutes or maybe 6 minutes of commercials. And then you'll go back to 7 or 8 minutes of news, or 7 or 8 minutes of the program. And then you'll go back to the commercial situation. I think even some of the areas that you subscribe to, I think Prime, is it Prime, where it used to be you pay a fee. Well, now you pay a fee and they also give you commercials. So that probably will happen with the other movie programs too, is eventually you just won't be able to get away from people trying to sell you things. So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with well, like watching movies, to have a long day at the office or a long day in a meditation hall. Watch a movie. I'm not against entertainment at all. I'm just saying, be very aware. Here again, that word that I use over and over, very aware of how you're using, how that's showing up in the consciousness. It just doesn't mean that if you're aware that you're avoiding bad feelings or sad feelings by watching a movie. It's about the awareness of that, not being somebody who no longer watches movies because they're so disciplined. Thinking that is just, I'm not going to use that word. I'll use the other word, crap. You don't have to do that. You don't have to modify your behavior. The only modification that I recommend in your behavior is to hold still and watch the behavior. hold still, and observe it, rather than try to change yourself or manipulate yourself into some kind of ideal being. You do not have to improve. I'm not saying there aren't other people telling you otherwise, and if someone is telling you, saying other ways that you should do this, you probably should listen to them. I'm not the end all be all of authority, but if you're listening to me, probably good idea to listen, consider what I'm saying. Disagree. You don't have to agree with me. I don't need anyone's agreement to anything. I know what I'm saying. I understand what I'm saying, and I'm not correct. I'm not incorrect. I'm not correct. I don't have a position like that. So if you want to bring it this way, where you see things differently, I'm delighted to talk to you about it or discuss it to some extent. Can't do too much. I'm here to give you a Dharma talk, not to have a conversation. I can do a little bit of that if it seems to be necessary to you. My intention here is to help you. It is not to control you, get you to join a cult or follow, do everything Sokuzan says. Even the people who are monks here know they get a lot of leeway, although they're asked to do a lot of practicing. The forms here are very strong. If you did every form that was here, you wouldn't have much free time at all. But I leave that up to each individual. No one wants to be suffered. But the suffering might bring you in a situation where you really finally understood, I really need to look at this suffering that I don't want, rather than figure out ways to get around the suffering or stop it or keep it at bay for 3 weeks or 3 months or 3 hours. Very, very difficult. No,
Bowing, is all the suffering we experience on the path necessary?
yes. When you say necessary, I'm assuming cause and effect, cause and effect. So probably it is. If it shows up and then it's there it is. It's what you do with it and how you work with that. It's important. It needs to be about awareness. And the awareness eventually through watching the suffering, watching the movement come and go, come up and turn around, go the other way, and watching the mind stream turn away from it, distraction or ignorance, or watching the mind grasp at it, watching that part of the mind that thinks there is somebody that can get control of this, the assumption that there's somebody who's suffering. The suffering itself is dependently arisen. Fundamentally, there's no one suffering. But that takes a while to see that. You have to actually look at the identity that assumes there's a suffering going on and there's someone suffering. Hard work, very hard work being trapped in a body-mind complex that you think you are, and you are to some extent, but you're also way beyond this. The beyond is the only word I can think of. So you're not trapped anywhere. There never was a trap, but it sure looks like it. Go ahead, please.
Bowing, if we are doing things to lessen our suffering, it seems like we're avoiding if we do anything with that suffering.
So that's why it's the middle way, a little bit. So do something with it. We're not talking about torturing you. Some people think, oh, there's, like the Buddha in ancient times, he actually went out and went without eating. That's why you see sculptures of him with his ribs showing. He went without food and he tortured himself. And then he came back and had a glass of milk, sat down on some kusha grass and decided he was going to just see what this was. And he, as the story goes, he stayed there, resolved not to get up until he understood what this whole thing was. And apparently his 6 years of doing everything else had some kind of set some kind of a tone for what he was about to do there, is realize his true nature.
Bowing is, it seems like without suffering, we cannot make any so-called progress on the path.
That would be a way of saying it. Yes, without actually seeing that we're suffering. And the most important thing to see is not only your own suffering. We all know that if you're here, you're a monk, which you are. Now, if you're a practitioner, whether you're a monk or not, if you've been practicing for a while, you realize that this is hard. It's extremely hard to do. Everyone I talk to has, not that people don't have a sense of humor too, but it's very, very difficult. And I would not be able to do this with anybody if there was some kind of airy fairy just be happy, like the song goes. Don't worry, be happy, or some kind of power positive thinking. So I'm not saying there's people that shouldn't be doing that. Of course, there are people that are, there's all kinds of things you could be doing that could fundamentally help you. Whether it's a spiritual path, I don't know. I'm not here to evaluate that. I'm just saying, I know what is happening here. I know what I'm looking at, and that's what I teach out of. So it's important to receive what arises in your mind stream without fighting with it. Don't go to war with your mind or with anybody's mind. And then when you really realize your own suffering, which is not, you just stop covering everything up, then you begin to realize there's no solid person who's suffering. It's just the suffering, which does not necessarily make it any easier. The transition from seeing this person and the suffering there, and then being able to see into others and seeing that the way people act so crazy and are so sometimes obnoxious or difficult, they're suffering. And they might have to act a certain way to cover up their suffering. We see this in children who just fly into a rage or cry or everything. They're suffering. They don't know what to do. So they start covering it up with screaming, crying, pounding the floor. I was one of those children. And maybe you were. I would get so upset, I would curl myself into a ball, or I would run as fast as I could at a wall, curl up into a ball, and just crash into the wall. And my mother would scream at me, "Don't you throw yourself." And I remember thinking it put me into an existential crisis there. I actually cannot throw myself because in order to throw something, you have to pick something up. I'm thinking this at 3 years old. I have to pick something up and throw it. So I felt like I took exception to what she said, but was not able to interact because I didn't have any language for it. But we're trying to get out of the suffering. No one wants to be suffered. None of us want this. But we have different ways of doing it, covering it up, running away, having a lot of discursive thoughts about it, blaming others, blaming ourselves. It's just it's a Coney Island of the mind. It is so extensive and vast and crazy. And this little part makes a little bit of sense, but if you look right over here, suddenly this is totally outrageous. If we watch the political scene right now, it's just astonishing how completely nuts people can be. Even the people that seem to be relatively sane still will fight with crazy people. They fight with them. They fight with people who are way over the top, crazy, insane. Yes. Anything else? Go ahead.
I'm thinking of our forebears like Naropa and Milarepa and
Yes.
some of the others who have crazy stories of intense suffering.
Yes,
And much of it was inflicted by their teachers.
that's
Is
true.
that true?
And quite often, that's what happened. It wasn't a standard necessarily, but yes. Talopa basically tortured Naropa, and Marpa basically tortured Milarepa. And then there are stories in other the Zen lineages, and which is what Sokuzan has been talking about, especially. Really intense difficulty there. Yes.
What is a student's role when the teacher is causing suffering?
Receive. Receive it. Don't disagree with anything. And don't agree with it either. That's just as bad. Don't agree, don't disagree. Don't ignore. Don't ignore your life. Don't miss your true nature. It's being delivered up to you. And sometimes it might look like this person is outrageous. Well, maybe I am. But what I'm interested in is helping you to see your true nature, which is without a self. This just consciousness only. And this is an illusion. This is a profound mirage that is solid. That's why it's so convincing, scary. The emotions are real. They take you by the throat and twist you up in knots. Sanho.
You're direct with us, but you don't torture us, at least not me. Why don't you torture us?
I just ain't gotten to you yet.
Excellent.
They're pretty quick response. So, and I work with everybody differently. Some people might think I'm a shmoo. You know what a shmoo is?
No.
Yeah, it's a little, looks kind of like a bowling pin, but it's really fat. And it comes out of, is it Joe Palooka back in the cartoon back in the 50s?
Little Abner.
Huh?
Yeah.
Little Abner. They were little beings that ran around on 2 feet and didn't have any arms.
They were blue.
Huh?
They were blue.
No, those are. Huh?
Smurfs.
Those are Smurfs.
They were blue?
No, schmoos were white. Get it right.
Bowling pins,
Huh?
like
They
bowling.
look like bowling pins. So, but what I was gonna say is, the way I relate to you, anyone who's in this room, and some of the people on the screen know that, if you're sitting in front of me, you get this. You get whatever and not that I'm so correct, or I have this wonderful understanding of everybody's psychology. I have no idea who I'm talking to. It's just that you show me what you need and I give it to you. And you may not like it. And it may feel like crap. Some people are affected more than others. Some people think I'm a sweetheart, and they say, why don't you treat me like you do this person or that? Well, this person says you're really hard on them, or they act like it or something, but you're always really sweet and kind to me. What's that about? And I would say if you were to even ask me that, I have no idea what that is. I don't make decisions. I haven't made decisions in many, many years. Decisions show up. The door opens and I go through it. Or if it doesn't open up, I don't do anything with it. Yes.
Well, Divine, what if the teachers demands, I shouldn't say demands, but what if the teacher is teaching us in ways that look crazy or countercultural?
Well, there's lots of things you can leave. And I don't mean to judge anybody, but this may not be, I may not be your teacher. If the chemistry's not there, then it might not be there. I'm not here I won't promise you anything. I have no advertisements. I have no guarantee. This may not work. You may practice the rest of your life. You may go into retreat for 6 months and may not have a realization particularly. Is that what you're looking for? More?
What Divine, what is our role when we're seeing a fellow Sangha member suffering intensely from the teaching, from what appears to be the teaching?
You could ask them how they're doing and listen to them. Don't believe it, don't disbelieve it, and don't ignore it. And do not offer any kind of help unless they ask you. They don't ask, just listen. Offer nothing. As a Sangha member, as a fellow brother or sister, or someone who's studying the Dharma. This doesn't mean you couldn't take them to lunch or something. You couldn't do any number of things. Offer to watch their dog. I don't know if I'm getting close to what you're looking for. You're talking about some kind of really, really difficult, smelly situation. Want to say more?
What
You
about?
got the guts?
Well, I'm looking at, you know, how does the Sangha deal with something that looks really intense for one individual? And
Oh, well, one of the things we've been doing is having meetings of people who are fully ordained monks. And one day out of the month, we are starting to have resident meetings, anyone who lives in this community, so we can get together and talk about some of this stuff. And as some of you know, that's not really comfortable, but we do it anyway. And I don't make a demand that you attend these meetings, but I think it's a good idea. We should get together and talk about this. My teacher never did this. Trungpa never did this. He should have, looking back on it. And Kobun didn't do this. Kobun was wired completely differently. I wasn't immediately in that community. So, but something like that was needed there, according to people that I talked to that were there 30 years ago. Some kind of a talking together about what's happening with other people who are practicing intensely. More?
what is it about listening and observing that suffering in a community like this that is helpful?
You're going to have to elaborate a little bit more. What is it that's suffering?
You know, we're basically witnessing another person's suffering as a community. That seems, I don't know, innately powerful, but it also seems like it can be intensify the suffering.
What intensifies it?
The microscope of a lot of eyes in the Sangha, you know, when some of this stuff is
In
brought
other
up,
words, embarrassing,
and which could amplify the suffering.
could. You want to be more specific?
It can be if you feel that would be valuable. I'm thinking about just with this topic, no one wants to be suffered.
Yes.
Are,
So what do we
when
do
we
about
talk about it in community, are we suffering people?
So we just, you heard me, the slogan that I have is CCC, communicate, cooperate. If you're communicating, you probably are going to be able to cooperate unless the communication is really one-sided. In other words, just you talking and never listening. This is why I say CCC, communicate, cooperate, and then there may be some collaboration even if you're really lucky. But the first C, it has to be 90% listening, or at least somewhere in the area of that, over 50%. You have to really hear. You have to make sure, am I hearing you say da, da, da? Are you saying this? It sounds like you're saying, repeat what that person is saying and say it. Now, the way that sounds is even though you're saying it this way, it sounds like this is how you're, I mean, actually have some interaction with that person and do it in community if you can. I'm not talking about therapy, even though that can come into it. I mean, you're a therapist, so you know what I mean. You've done lots of group therapy, as I understand or recall, and individual therapy. As other people here, I know Kelly Climbey has done that kind of work. And who sent you here? Let's see her. I thought she was here earlier. Maybe she's with Rumi, but people in the community who are therapists work. That's a totally valid way of working with people. I'm not saying everybody should meditate. Nobody should have a therapist. No, I'm all about all of this. Any way you can help people. Some people, that's the only way you can reach them is through some kind of talking. Other people, they have to sit down their butt and watch the nature of the mind. We're all a little different in this area. More?
Divine, what's coming up for me is when we're witnessing the suffering of an individual, and it just seems like there's not anything we can do other than observe, listen. 90.
Yes.
It seems like in some ways, are we complicit in their suffering?
No. Not at all. Just like if I sit down, I have lots of face-to-face interviews in private with people. I don't know how many, but a lot of them every week. Some of them are timed and are pretty close. Some of them are not timed, just depends on the individual. And I do my best to listen and meet those people where they're at. And people keep wanting to talk to me. So I listen to them, and quite often I talk to them. We have a conversation sometimes. And it's about really difficult material, but I don't go in and try to fix it or solve it for them.
One more question.
Please.
If you are our teacher, is everyone in the Sangha a teacher as well? Because we are a student of yours.
If they may not be a teacher and know they're functioning as a teacher, if they think they're functioning as a teacher, probably not. That's a little bit highfalutin there. But if you're a student, then everything can be your teacher. You learn how to, this is something that my teacher, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, said, the function of the teacher is to introduce you to your world. And what is your world? You're not separate from it. So in order to actually have what he talks about in the what is it in the spiritual materialism is the teacher introduces you to the universality of the guru or of the teacher. So you can see you need a teacher so you can receive shit that you can't really receive in any other way unless you have strong devotion to a teacher. This is not believing them. It's not a cult. I'm not talking about that. This has been around for thousands of years. A cult is much different. That's all about controlling people and getting people to obey you. That's not happening here as far as I know. If you think it is, let me hear it. Ask me about it right now. Don't hold back. I won't. So we learn how to do that, and then we begin to learn from others. We begin to be a student to others and see what that area of being a student of others might be more receiving how much suffering is happening with that person, that on the surface, the only thing we're seeing is the surface of their confusion, that they might be barking or carrying on or blaming others. And yet what you see when you see that, you actually see that intense suffering behind that. No one wants to be suffered. And so they don't know how to get rid of it. So they blame or accuse, or we've seen this in our own community recently. So this that doesn't mean we go back and scold the person or accuse them of covering things up, and they need to be responsible for their feelings and all of that. Although there might be some of that going on more. Sanho, I'll get to you in a minute.
So who about it? When I see someone suffering or several someone's, and I care about all of them, and I can acknowledge this is a horrible situation and there's nothing I can do. What do we do?
There's no standard protocol for any of that. It's awareness. Awareness is the only thing that we really have as meditators, as students of the Buddha's teaching, of Buddha's Dharma. Awareness. It's not about this and that, although some teachings in the past talk about upaya or skillful means, where because you're functioning out of wisdom, you actually know what to pick up and turn over and what to put back down, and who to leave alone and who to come right in and move into their area and say, you need to move here, you need to do this. You do that out of spacious awareness, not out of a self that's right and another self that's incorrect and needs to be corrected. We get into that, as soon as you start to see that, like you think you know something and somebody else doesn't, stop. This is called renunciation. You can do that. Do I do that? I don't know. I don't keep track of what I do. I have no credentials. When I say I'm nobody, I don't mean that I'm some kind of a non-entity. No, I'm a strong, powerful entity, but I don't have a center. If you have a center, bring it to me, and then I'll help you with that. Called ego. Shoto.
Shadow bowing, with that idea of, I think the phrase is being tortured by the teacher, how much of that is the projection of the student?
Well, probably the teacher, if it's a true teacher, she or they are unlikely to be torturing anybody. They don't see anybody. They don't see other people, but the other people bring their self-centeredness, their identity to the teacher, and the teacher, if they have permission, and some students are able to give complete permission. There's no way you could chase them away. They're giving you so much permission. And then other people will give you permission, but unless you act this way or this way. So, and then it starts to show up as a cultural situation where, well, you can say this and this and this, but you can't do this because teachers shouldn't do that. Big misunderstanding. Don't believe a word I'm saying. Consider it. But I'm not asking you to believe. I don't need anybody believing anything. Go ahead.
Shadow bowing, if we feel like we're getting difficulty from the teacher, is that showing us how we're not receiving the teaching?
There's no standard for it, but it could be. If you're asking that question, then probably something like that showing up. That's not registering over here with a personal relationship between you and me. I don't necessarily see that, but it's not up to me to do that. It's up to me to meet you where you're at. And if I meet you where you're at, I won't have a credential for it. If I do, then I'm not a true teacher. I'm teaching out of, I know more than you do, and I have to help the poor suffering mortal. There isn't anyone. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but it's the truth. Go ahead.
Shadow bowing, a little bit of a different area. You brought up your teaching of no one's pouring feelings into you. They're our emotions.
Yes.
When we're the triggerer of someone else
Mhm.
who's having some emotions, what's our responsibility for their emotions?
Be the trigger. I mean, you say they're blaming you for how they're feeling.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you could say, whoops, sorry about that. Sorry, you're going to have a rough time. And then they're probably going to want more than just that. They're gonna wanna come in and get you to, they are going to want some bloodletting. And say, yeah, you could say that, but are you really responsible? Or they're gonna wanna fight with you about it. And say, you could do a little bit of that, and if it gets difficult where they're trying to fight with you, leave. Four karmas: pacify, enrich, magnetizing, destroy. I don't mean hit them. I mean, you can do it. Oh, you're gonna do that?
I'm just remembering an area where it got pretty intense. for
Yeah,
me.
it can get terrible. There've been times when and I have both yelled at each other, haven't we? No, I mean, she mainly yells more than I do. But I yell too. I've not cleaned up any act. There's nothing to clean up. But there's a lot to be aware of. Don't miss who you are. Don't miss your karma. Don't cover it up with some kind of ideal, perfect being who's more and more kind and loving. And just please don't do that. Be genuine. Be who you are. You can actually be who you are if you stop trying to be somebody separate from everybody else. And all you have to do that is just see that you never were separate from anybody else. It's an awareness practice, not a conclusion practice. And it's very challenging, and the ego does not want any part of that. And it will fight you tooth and nail. That's why it's necessary to have a teacher who sees this. I have students fighting me and thinking that their emotions are caused by me. And are they? Maybe. Go ahead.
Show vowing, I feel like I might act differently around my friends who I know don't practice compared to someone who I know has a practice. I might actually try to clean up my act a little bit more to protect
Seduce them
someone,
and hope that they'll become Buddhists.
not to irritate them, but
Oh.
for like a Sangha member, I kind of don't give a shit if I irritate them.
Well, at least Tano has a sense of humor. Yeah, go ahead.
And I'm wondering,
What's your question?
should whether or not someone else practices affect how we treat them?
It just seems like it's quite a bit of thinking and calculating around that. I wouldn't worry too much about it. I just wouldn't worry about it. What you're looking for, there is some kind of an understanding based on relative stuff of should I or shouldn't I, or should I do it this way or treat this person different? Should I be treating this person differently? Just however you're treating them, that's how you're treating them. Just be aware of that, because you do not have that much of a say-so. That's coming out of the causes and conditions that we commonly refer to as karma. The prarabdha karma, the karma that comes out of your lifetime that gives you that kind of ear, that kind of eye color. That's completely choiceless. What's amazing is the karma that you begin to create to cover up anything you don't like about your prarabdha karma. What comes in this lifetime or birth, that looks like you have a choice, and you do not. You don't have a choice about any of it. All of it is dependent, it was in parakalpa or imaginary. It's imaginary. We're dreaming it up. Take a few more questions, maybe. Yes.
So, Corinne, bowing, do you perceive the Sangha as being cloistered from the greater community?
I don't know if I'd call it cloistered. There's a difference if you're living in the monastery, as you know, and for years you lived up north, 3.5 hours away. Isn't this quite a bit different down here? Do you feel anti-cloistered up there? But it's different, but it's each person is so unique, and so some people just can't live here. They don't want to live here. They don't mind visiting, but they want to stay here. And other people want to be here. They want to be in this environment, kind of a hot box.
So, Corinne, bowing, we call ourselves like the community mindfulness center, that is an intention of the community reaching out.
About the new structure we're trying to get funds.
We're in Karma House community.
Yes, body, mind, spirit. We're doing that with the whatever yoga, acupuncture, Chinese medicine, uh, more traditional therapies. What else? There's all kinds of things that are happening. There's going to be some legal services offered there and some financial services given to people. But what do you call it? Pro bono. So, I mean, some things are being charged for, but it's. You have a question about anything?
Yeah, so Corinne Valley, how do we look at reaching the community as a expanding into that area as a community that actually feels a little more sheltered or,
So you think we should clean up our act before we present ourselves to the community? I'm not sure if that's where you were going, but it's just tempting to jump on that.
or how do we reach out into the community when we are focused inward?
The same, we do both. We do the best we can here. This is a more intentional community, and then the community out there where we are reaching out in that direction. Some people don't even want to do that. The path is too difficult for them. They don't even want to share it with anybody else. Probably have heard that said recently. Yes, go ahead.
Was it good along those lines? Given that it is difficult, as a Sangha, should we endeavor not to make each other's lives more difficult? I mean, do we need to?
Are you saying you're not endeavoring to make each other's lives more difficult?
It's kind of a follow-up to Shoto's question. I think he said not giving a shit if he irritates Sangha. And I'm just wondering, should we endeavor not
You know
to
him pretty
irritate
well. What do
each
you
other?
mean by that? Does that sound like him? Seriously, does that sound like something he would say? I mean, he just said it, but now I want to know if that sounds like something he would say.
It doesn't surprise me.
It doesn't surprise me. So what's your question?
So goodbye, given that it's difficult, should we endeavor not to step on each other's toes or irritate each other as Sangha?
Well, yeah, I think that kind of goes without saying. I don't know if anyone's deliberately trying to hurt anyone else. Well, if you can, is that what you're asking me?
Was it good? I think your response to him was that we don't really have any say-so about.
You don't, but you have an intention. And that may show, the intention may show you, not only may show you, probably will show you just how much control you have about it. Intention, that's why I say over and over and over again, intend to see the truth yourself. Don't believe me, don't believe the Buddha, don't believe anyone, don't disbelieve anyone, and don't ignore anything or anyone. Just watch your mind and find out who you are. So you get your identity, if there is such a thing. You get your credibility, if there is such a thing, from your consciousness, if there is such a thing as your consciousness. Train your mind. Spend some time doing nothing but holding still and watching the continually ramping up quality of the mind, trying to grasp, trying to shut down passion, aggression, and turning away or ignorance or distraction. Just watch that circularity of the mind until you see what the fundamental truth is. If you see what the fundamental truth is, you will no longer make any decisions based on anything, any standard, any right and wrong, and you will live perhaps totally ordinary. You might not show up as a dot on the map, or you might live a life that is completely outrageous and unacceptable by anyone. But you won't start any wars. The outrageousness, I'm not talking about murdering people. I'm just saying outrageous, unconventional, not based on the social or cultural mores. Also not necessarily disagreeing with them, just to be outrageous, but just looking at things as they arise and relating to human beings, other people, as they show up in front of you. Helping people when it's just obvious you have to do that is choiceless. And mind your own business and keeping your distance. When you see what it is, it's choiceless. You won't make a choice about it. You won't evaluate anything. And I'm not against evaluation. There are times when you have to do a really heavy form of evaluation because the relative situation is so obscure and so convoluted. You might have to do a lot of that. But a one-on-one, looking in someone's eyes, you know exactly what you're looking at. It may start out with a lot of projection, see how much you project on others. You don't really face people. This is why when we have disagreements or agreements or have conversations here, we sit down, face each other, bow to each other, and then spend a few minutes just looking into each other's eyes before we enter into a conversation. If you're not doing that, I highly recommend it. Yes.
Sokuzan, if there is difficulty in the Sangha and you're sitting down, as you just recommended, what is our intention? What intention do we bring to that?
To sitting down with someone,
If
receive,
there's difficult in sitting down,
receive, observe, receive. You're just like looking at your own mind, except there's another person there. Receive it. Don't agree, don't disagree, don't ignore. 3 poisons. And the practice of doing that is to notice how you can't help but do one of those 3, or maybe combinations, pushing, pulling. But you may be able to do that without necessarily hooking up your vocal cords or waving your finger at somebody. You may be able to just receive the emotions that arise in the mind stream and be responsible for them. They're your feelings. Go ahead.
Sokuzan, is receiving a form of putting others before ourselves?
Yes,
Is it,
yes.
do we need to have the intention to put the other person first in order to receive?
Probably. For a while, until you see there is no self, there is no other, and then the receiving is, you could call it automatic, but there's no, you're not aware of what you're doing anymore as an individual. You just function. You function with what shows up. You're functioning very relative to everyone else because you're not going to stand out like the proverbial sore thumb. But from the perspective of the consciousness that is there, you do not care what happens next. You don't have an agenda other than the vow to be with all things, to save all beings, to put others before yourself, no matter what, even if at the cost of your own death, which is unlikely to happen in this situation, but it can feel like it at times if everybody else is winning and you're not, or someone you're really close to is turning away from you and has no understanding of you and is being disruptive, can be very uncomfortable. Yes.
Show bowing. An image you use sometimes, I feel, is you'll talk about consciousness and awareness when someone asks you to separate those a bit, that the awareness is more of like a
Spotlight.
is that awareness what we mistake as a self?
Well, the attribution is if you're aware of something, you think it's you that's aware of that, or you that's not aware of that over there. So there's a lot of various discursive thought going around that to reinforce that. I'm thinking this, and I'm thinking that, and I'm worried about this, I'm worried about that. So a lot of extra thinking process that reinforces the illusion that there's a person here and behind these eyes, or that is hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking, feeling. Any questions on Zoom?
So how receptive are the inmates at the correctional facilities? I know we discussed when we're really young, we can throw tantrums. That kind of resorts to older adults. They're insane.
Who's asking the question? I don't see your face anywhere.
Yes, sir. Sorry. This is Ben.
Okay. Oh, Ben Stone. Okay, Ben. What's your last name, Ben?
Kemp.
Okay, Ben. Yeah, we recently conversed on by text.
Yes, sir.
Okay, what is your question again, sir?
So I discovered that you're working at correctional facilities. I was kind of looking to see how receptive these teachings are to these inmates, and if there's any progress for change in those who are suffering very extremely.
Okay, so that's something I've been doing off and on, not so much right now. Some of my students are working in that area, but I've been doing that since the the 1990s, working in various prisons, both federal and state. I haven't done too much lately. That's a little bit harder for me to do these days. And but to respond to your question, I think it helps in ways that are not really obvious. I've been in many, over 30 correctional facilities here in Michigan and 3 different federal prisons, and taught meditation, awareness practice, and so on, and Buddhism. And to try to address your question as well as I can, I would say the situation that they're in a highly controlled and conditioned hell realm. And so, and I think my idea there, and I've been talking to one of my students here who is an attorney, and we're looking at some point in the not too distant future about going in and trying to change some of the just basic difficulty they're having there, which one is their food quality is horrible, like feeding people cardboard or something. Horrible. And so I also have several inmates, not many, but that have been incarcerated. And so I have the firsthand information. And so some of them are very close students. And so we're trying to find what's the very best thing. I'm not so sure that mindfulness practice or awareness or shikantaza is the best thing to teach there, having done this for well over 30 years. I could, and if you and I were to sit down, I could tell you stories about it. We could talk about it more, but I would say that it seems to be helpful in some ways. If someone gets a practice of sitting meditation and gives them something to do in there besides just beat their head against the wall or fight with other inmates, which there's a lot of warfare there. They don't protect them from each other. They put them in a community of people that are all having problems. There's no training, specifically no mind training for anyone. And it's very difficult for anyone who, one of my students who, Yudao, who's also a monk, she's recently been into a prison and was saying how difficult it is just to be a volunteer. You're treated like crap in there. Not always. Occasionally you find a chaplain or somebody who is fairly supportive, but a lot of times you're treated just like the family of the inmates, even though the inmate did something 20 years ago when they were 16 and is now incarcerated for the rest of their life. Treated terribly. It's a hell realm, and it's just very difficult. The situation that she's been running into is, excuse me, is just the lack of cooperation on the part of the people who work there. They're not paid a lot. There's not a lot of training for them, a little bit just to get them to obey. But how to work with people who are incarcerated there's not a lot of training for them. So it's I think it helps that give the inmates something to do besides just go to the law library, which they're allowed, especially if it's a level 5 or high security situation. They're not allowed to do much, but their religious spiritual path is something they're allowed 1 hour a week, usually, maybe a little more in some cases, and maybe an hour in the law library. And the rest of the time, if they're level 5 high security, they're just locked up and fed junk. So any further question, Ben?
Not as of right now. However, I do have a little bit more I'd like to discuss with you. Is there a good time I might be able to give you a call?
The best thing to do is go on the website and ask for an interview with me, and then someone, either probably Unyo, will get a hold of you or respond, possibly Chazan, or someone will set up a time where we can have a phone chat or a Zoom chat. Are you close to the monastery?
About 30-35 minutes, yes.
You should come here. Have an interview. Having a face-to-face interview is the very best way to do this, so I can look in your eyes and you can look in mine.
A week from Saturday is our all day.
A week from Saturday is our all day. Once you do that once a month, just show up for the all day at what, 9 a.m. 9 a.m. and then you'll get in it. You schedule an interview, and that way you'll be able to practice with us. You'll meet the community members that are here for that all day, and you'll just love it here. Just great.
8 a.m.
Yes, sir. I'll see you guys then.
8 a.m. Yeah, thanks for the correction. 8 a.m.
Showed up.
Yeah, see you then, Ben. Nice to talk to you. Shoto, did you say that?
No, Zoom.
She had a really Low voice. Sanho,
So no bowing. Ben's question was how receptive the inmates are to the teachings.
yes.
How receptive are the inmates to the teachings?
Thank you for remembering that, and you're correct. Ben's question was about the reception, and I think it really varies. I mean, it's a lot of times people who come, I've had people come who are only there because the only chance they get to hang out with their homies is in a religious situation, so they sit next to people and they chat the whole time. They don't listen to the Dharma at all. Other people are really interested and are studying and are trying to understand the teachings and practice on their own. This is where in prisons where I developed the teaching of ASAP, or alternating sense awareness practice, where someone could practice for a short time but have a really strong shikantaza practice without doing standard satipatthana practices. So I'd say it's, thank you again for that, Sandro, but I'd say it's variable. It's up to including really receptive and showing up at the monastery later on when they get out. Some of them never get out. And I remember one fellow, I can tell a quick story about that. One fellow who was a murderer, and I don't know how that all happened. He talked a little bit about it at the time. It was just situational. Just had to do what he had to do. And he was in there and had been in for, when I met him, he'd been in for about 10 years, and would be in the rest of his life. And he, after he'd been in about 7 or 8 years, he stumbled into the Dhammapada. It just happened to be laying somewhere. And he helped, sorry. It's hard to meet people who are in hell. I'll get there in a minute. He held up a copy of the Dhammapada. And he said, "Why isn't everyone reading this?" Oh, coming from a Afro-American inmate who was probably 30 years old. And you could tell this had at least changed his life somewhat, even though he's locked up in a box for the rest of his life. I saw him a few more times at other facilities, but he was always in a fairly high security. And it was anytime I saw him at other facilities, he was still practicing meditation. So anyway, thank you for putting up with my waking up. I didn't see that coming. Is there a further question before we close? Very good. Thank you so much.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jiho san chi shi fu, shi son lu sa moko sa, moko ja. The 10 directions, the 3 times, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita,